Hello and welcome. Today we are talking about gaming posture. So, gaming posture is arguably the most important factor that is important for gaming health. Among other things, it's the foundation of everything we do as gamers. So, before we dive into it, let me read to you our disclaimer. So, the information we discuss today is for educational purposes only and is not intended to replace the advice of your doctor. Esports Healthcare disclaims any liability for the decisions you make based on this information. Any interaction during this stream does not establish, nor does it imply, a doctor-patient relationship. Esports Healthcare does not offer this information for diagnostic or treatment purposes. We're going to start with the first question of what is posture. So for that, I'm going to turn to our boy Jordan, who we've nicknamed JP for Jordan Posture because this is his favorite topic. So Jordan, why
It's
don't you
my
tell us
all-time favorite.
why don't you tell us what posture is? What's going on here?
All right. So simply put, posture is the position that we put our bodies in while we're sitting, standing, or lying down. It is, good posture is the correct alignment of body parts supported by the right amount of muscle tension against gravity. Basically what that means is you want to be able to keep the spinal segments, right? I'm going to leave it at the spine for right now, in the most optimal position so that the muscles aren't working too hard to hold certain structures up, whether it be your head, your mid back, the low back you're not really going to be holding that up. That's really the chair's job if you're sitting, but standing, you're going to engage some core muscles, things that Dan and all of us are going to be getting into shortly. But without posture and the muscles that control it, our bodies would just fall right to the ground, right? Because that's what gravity's job is to keep us held to the planet. So if our muscles don't hold us up, we will just lay down.
I lay down sometimes anyway.
Yeah, say, huh? Posture control is generally unconscious, right? So your body automatically does it. Very rarely do you actively engage posture muscles unless I say, "Hey Dan" or "Hey Corey, how's your head position?" And you're gonna do one of these, your head up, right? That only when people begin to talk about posture does you as yourself take an active role in correcting that, whatever the problem is. There's a bunch of muscle groups involved. Again, we're going to discuss them, why they're important, as well as some other issues that can arise from poor posture, as well as ways to engage in good posture. I think one thing that's important to note, and it's like one of the key things that at least I take away from the page on posture on the website, is that for us as gamers, right, we're seated. I know one person that stands in games, and he's an insane person. That just it ain't it. I don't get it. I need to sit down and focus.
What a strange
Yes,
person.
yes, it's so weird.
My
But
old roommate used to stand right in front of the TV playing.
that's what he does. I'm like, how do you play
Very
like that?
interesting.
But anyway,
Right? You get
yeah,
tired
it
so easily.
doesn't make sense. But it's important to note that sitting down is not optimal, right? It is not great for our bodies for reasons why we're going to discuss later. But it is not a normal position for our bodies to be in this seated position, right? And I think that's something that Corey is going to probably jump in on in terms of being in a squatting position and all that. But before we kind of get into that, I want to go into what muscles are actually involved in posture, right? And then we'll discuss why they're important. So Dan, if you want to take over there and just discuss some of the important muscles in posture.
Whenever you talk about posture or postural muscles, usually it's tough to come up with that to say that sentence without also including your core muscles. So everyone's heard of their core. Break it down. It's basically a series of muscles around the torso, the midsection, and their job is really to hold you upright. So this is going to be your transverse abdominis going around the front, your internal, your external obliques, the multifidi, which are tiny muscles that go along the vertebra of your spine going up the whole way. Your erector spinae, which are kind of those big, long, cable, thick muscles running all the way from your sacrum, your your hip area all the way up to the head and neck. You're also looking at your diaphragm and your pelvic floor muscles. So these muscles are important for keeping your body. They're thought of almost like a corset. Corset, the clothing piece. They're meant to hold everything, bind everything in, keep you upright. And this is very important as you're sitting. This is what keeps you up in your chair as opposed to slouching, leaning forward. And as these poor postural habits kind of come out during sitting, those groups of muscles we're looking more at are going to be associated with what's known as upper crossed and lower crossed syndromes. With upper cross syndromes, with any of these, there's usually a series of tight or an overactive muscles and a series of weak, long, lengthened, inhibited muscles. And so in terms of the upper cross, you're going to have tight upper traps, levator scapulae muscles on the back of the neck in the shoulder region. You're looking at tight pecs and SCM, and they're going to be bringing those shoulders rounding forward, bringing that head carriage where you have your head resting anteriorly or forward. And as those muscles are tight, you're also going to have weak, deep neck flexors. And yes, also going to have weak, deep neck flexors, weak lower traps. These are kind of the opposition muscles of the tight one. It's a pair, a give and take. And then when you look at the lower crossed, you're going to end up with tight hip flexors, tight low back, the erector spinae and the lumbar low back region will also get tight. You'll kind of have that anteriorly rotated pelvis with the really hyper or large curve in your low back. It normally should be, it's lordotic, you'd be hypo, but usually with lower cross, you see hyper lordotic. And as these two problems arise, there's usually pain, discomfort associated with them, which we'll get into later. There's also accessory muscles that might get tight. Jordan's favorite, the piriformis muscle, the hamstrings are two commonly tight muscles associated with long periods of sitting. We'll get into more problems that arise from that. But posture is, like Corey, Jordan were saying, one of the most important things to gamers' health. Think about you're sitting in a chair that entire period of time. Doing it improperly can cause a cascade of issues and problems.
I think it's important that it's
so
one of the
Corey,
most simple things that you can start to correct. We've talked about introducing a warm up, stretching, all these kind of dietary changes. Those all take time, but in terms of fixing one's posture, it's one of the easiest things that you can do on your own.
Definitely. And
so I guess leading into the next part, right? You've talked about some of the muscles, and we're gonna readdress some of those muscles and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of gamers and posture, right? Why is it important, and what things can we do to kind of make sure that we're in the right position, Corey?
So posture is most valuable to gamers because obviously Jordan mentioned, other than the one friend that he has, most of us are sitting while we're playing. So for the average gamer, you might play a few hours a day. Professional gamer might play 8 to 10 hours a day most days of the week. So back when the internet became this big boom and a lot of people were starting to work at computers for the first time, it was people in their working age, generally 22 to 60ish range, working at a computer, and there was an increase in health problems related to that. There was an increase in back pain. There was an increase in some other issues that were involved with sedentary lifestyle, and all of those things come down to the foundation of posture. And when that was a problem then, it's become a bigger problem now because the gamers that we have that are gaming 8 to 10 hours a day most days of the week are not the 22, 26 to 60 range. Most of them are young teenagers, mid-teenage years, and then young 20s tends to be another most common. And of course, there's gamers like us who are 30 years old and give or take. But the heavy demographic of gamers is somewhere between 16 and 24 on average. So now we have a population of people who are young, and many of them are still developing. So their bodies are still growing, they're still changing. and they're sitting for 8 or 10 hours a day in these positions that have been known to cause problems that Dan just mentioned. So that's one part of it why it's so important. So Dan, you're going to say something?
I was saying, even, a lot of that population, when they're not gaming and practicing in that mode, sitting down all day, they're also at school all day for an additional 7-8 hours. So essentially, any non-sleeping hour, you're in a seated position.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the amount of time really does build up very fast.
Right. And that's a big issue because sitting in a chair, although depending on the chair you have, for example, Jordan has the DX Racer, and other people have some wonderful gaming chairs and other really comfortable seats. Sitting in a chair is not anatomically natural. It's not a position that your body is designed to be in. So if you look at populations of people that live in places that don't have the luxury of sitting in a chair, you'll find that a lot of them will squat and they'll sit on their heels when they rest. So if you see an underdeveloped country, or even if you look down to toddlers, kids that just started running around, when they sit to rest, they'll either sit on the floor or they'll squat on their heels. And that squatting heels position is a natural resting position, and it's also the natural position to use the restroom. So that's how you're supposed to go to the bathroom. If you've ever heard of the squatty potty, that was the invention to create that natural resting position. But sitting in a chair is not natural. It puts your body in a bad position, puts a lot of strain on the joints, puts a lot of strain on your spine in particular. And as Dan mentioned, it starts to pull your body forward. It makes the muscles tight, it makes the muscles tight in the front, and it makes the muscles weak in the back, which if you look at somebody, they'll slouch this way. They'll have the hunched position versus sitting upright with their chest up and their chin back. So posture is something that we're using kind of as a band-aid for sitting. It's not going to sitting in an appropriate posture is not going to stop the problems that are caused from prolonged sitting, but a more appropriate posture will set you up to be healthier longer and prevent some of these problems from occurring at a rapid pace, and it can also decrease the severity. So when we talk about posture, we're not going to mention this is the correct way to sit. We're not going to say this is the optimal or anything. Well, I guess actually optimal is a good word. We're not going to use words like this is the way,
the healthiest, yeah. Or the best,
because there's no such thing as good seated posture, because if you're sitting, you're technically doing harm to your body. So we're going to use terms like more appropriate, the optimal. We're going to use words that are essentially telling you that it's a more favorable position to keep your body rather than sitting and slouching, when the gamer lean where we get really intense and headbutt the screen.
Yes,
all those
it
things.
Makes you play better, obviously. I mean,
yeah.
I get it.
So at the end of the day, the posture is, like I said, a band-aid to prevent the health problems from prolonged sitting. But I keep mentioning health problems, and Dan mentioned a few of them, so I'm going to kind of piggyback on that and talk about a few others. There was one research study that I can probably post in the for the YouTube link that it took a look at the spinal loading of different body positions. So when people, for example, if you lie on your back with your knees bent and your feet flat on the floor, there was essentially zero pressure on your spine because you're laying down, the spine is being decompressed, so there's essentially zero pressure. For somebody standing in a neutral position, that was essentially, it was equivalent to their body weight. So if from the waist up, maybe there was 100 pounds of body weight, there was 100 pounds of pressure on the disc, and it was even. When that same person sat down, that 100 pounds could have turned into 150 pounds or more. The researchers found that there was an increase up to 150% of somebody's body weight on the discs of the spine in a seated position. And it wasn't saying seated slouched, it wasn't saying seated in a bad position, it was just seated in general. So seated upright like we are now, according to this research study, said that 150% of our body weight, our upper body weight, is now on the disc, loading it constantly while we're sitting. Then if I lean forward, if I do the gamer lean, then that pressure actually increases even higher. So what does that mean? The pressure on the disc is, it's actually what the disc is there for. Discs are made to absorb pressure. They're the compressive, and it dissipates the force outward into the bones. And it
Shock
protects,
absorbers.
Shock absorbers. It protects your bones from being damaged from the body weight. Additionally, the increased pressure is not good for the spine. Over time, that increased pressure can change the actual, it could change the bone. It can increase the density of the bone, which is not particularly healthy. It can flatten the disc. It can dehydrate the disc. It can lead to other disc degenerations. You've probably heard of words like disc bulge, disc herniation, other words like disc desiccation or annular tears. These are all a bunch of different things that we talk about in our profession about discs being injured. And one of the most common causes of disc injury is surprisingly not acute sprain or acute trauma, like falling down or getting hit by something, which certainly happens. But the most common injury or insult to a disc over time is sitting. Because that's, as we've mentioned now, gamers, kids in school, people working, we're kind of always sitting constantly. And over time, that's going to lead to this disc degeneration. Other issues that can happen, Dan already mentioned upper and lower cross syndrome. So I don't want to double down on that. It's essentially that's pulling everything down. It's creating more tension on the spine, more tension on the joints, which leads to the same degeneration. Other things that can happen up in this region, in the upper back, shoulders, neck, is one of the most common is tension type headaches. So Dan mentioned a couple of muscles that get tight, few in the front, few in the back. Other muscles in the back of the head are also culprits for tension type headaches. What ends up happening is these muscles get tight, and when they get tight, they get trigger points. Trigger points is our more fancy kind of like correct word for when people describe knots in their back, knots in their neck. When you have a knot in a muscle, it's an increased tension that can refer pain to an area of your head. So if you've ever had a headache around your forehead, that's probably the muscles that are on the back of your head. We call them suboccipital. If you've ever had a headache on the side of your head, that's more likely to be the upper trap. That's the muscle that shrugs. If you've ever had headaches around the side of your ears, kind of the side of your forehead, that could be a muscle up front called the SCM. Dan mentioned that before. And there's a couple different patterns that come from different muscles, but ultimately it's tension type headache. That's why we call it that. Muscles get tight, they cause pain. You now have a headache, which is interfering with every part of your day. The last one that I want to talk about is an impingement syndrome that can occur in the nerves or the arteries of essentially your chest and your shoulder. We call it thoracic outlet syndrome. This is another topic we'll get into in further detail later. But thoracic outlet syndrome is essentially those muscles that we talked about from the front of the neck. They cross over a network of nerves called the brachial plexus and an artery called the subclavian artery. So if you picture all of these structures are my fingers here, and then there's a muscle that comes over the top like this. If this muscle gets tight, it can squeeze either these nerves or the artery. When you have a nerve being squeezed, you get symptoms like numbness, tingling, weakness. If you have an artery that's being pressed, you might get the same symptoms, numbness, tingling, weakness, but you might also feel cold. Your skin might look lighter in color, pale, or even a blue color. And generally, those are some of the symptoms overlap, but ultimately, thoracic outlet can be traced back for so many people to a postural imbalance, which is that slouching forward. So we talked a little bit about the upper and lower cross, so I don't want to dive too much into that again. But ultimately, you can see that posture is, like I said, it's the foundation of healthy gaming. If you're sitting poorly, there's a lot of issues that are going to come up from doing that. And even if you don't sit poorly, if you're just sitting and then not doing some of the things we'll talk about later to counter the ill effects of prolonged sitting, you're likely to develop some of these problems throughout your career if you're just constantly sitting all the time. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But I mentioned before that we don't call anything perfect posture. We like to use the phrase more appropriate or optimal. So Dan, why don't you take it now and tell us what would be a more appropriate or optimal body position for sitting.
So the best of a bad situation. So when you're looking at sitting, a good start is to look at the chair you're in. So Jordan, if you would like to play Vanna White for a second, showing off the DX Racer. It's a great chair, very comfortable, and we'll go through a couple of the parts. So usually when you talk about posture, you kind of work head down, but since we're working with seating, it might be a little bit easier to work feet up. So you kind of it's kind of like a rule, a 90-90-90 rule. An easy way to think about it. So I don't know if the camera can go back enough. Jordan, would you be able to slide back to see more of the chair, or am I really
This is as
wishing
far as
for too
this is
much?
as far as I can go. What
All
we
right.
can do is I will link the DX Racer review. There's better
Yeah, that would
pictures
be a good
in
start.
there. But continue. I'm
So as
listening.
Jordan's doing that, and we're all going to pretend Jordan has legs somewhere at the bottom of his video screen.
Okay.
So the 90-90-90 comes in, and that's talking about the feet to the floor should be at a perfect right angle. The thigh to the knee to the lower leg should be another 90-degree angle.
I'm gonna
And
try to
then from the
put.
torso to the upper leg should be your third 90-degree angle. So as you go from the torso, it should be going straight down. Then your legs are at a 90-degree angle, and the knees will drop down to the floor. Your feet are sitting perfectly flat. If that's difficult for you because of height, you can get kind of like sometimes even having your feet placed on top of a book might solve that. They sell floor mats or floor cushions, things you can have to rest that it reaches that 90 degrees. And then as we go up the rest of the body, you would want your shoulders not to be rolled over in like those hunched over positions that we had talked about a few times already, but you want your shoulders to be back and down, not shrugging, not forward. You want your ears to be over your shoulders. So that means your head is back, again, not in that anterior head carriage, not in that leaning forward position. Uh, as you go into your arms, if you have a arm rest, that would be optimal. Jordan's chair has one. You can't see it because of the video, but you want your arms to be resting comfortably on the armrest. Again, it should be a normal drop. You don't want to be slouching down to reach, and you don't want them propping the arms up. As you come forward, for your PC users, when you have a desk, you want the desk to be just high enough that your thighs will be cleared by it, but not too high so that as your hands are resting on it, they're not going to be in an upward or downward position to reach the keyboard and the mouse. It will arise the same issues with postural problems of the back, the low back, the neck, will all arise from the arms and legs if they're not in proper posture or the best possible posture of sitting down. Again, and aside from the chair, another external piece of posture is the monitor height. The monitor is too high, too low, too far away. You might need to strain your head or neck to reach it and look at it properly. So you want the monitor to be, for every inch the monitor is, that's how far you want to be away from it. No less, no more than, no less than 20 inches. So you want to be
Nice.
farther than 20 inches away from it. It was tough with the lesson more than get the carrot. And you want to be aligned so that you're looking at the top third or quarter of the screen. So you might have to tilt it so it's upward angle it a little bit. But again, the whole point of the posture is to be in as neutral of a position as possible. Arms are just on the armrest. Legs, knees, hips are all at 90-degree angles. Feet comfortable on the floor. Anytime you're kind of in a more flexed or extended position, you get back into all of those problems that we had mentioned earlier. And again, I know we all do it, but leaning forward does not make you play better.
Mhm.
It just hurts the posture.
But it does.
Does though. It helps a little bit.
But a couple of things that I wanted to just jump in with there is, right, the part of the reason why you want the top third of the monitor to be at eye level is because it's easier to glance down than it is to look up, right? Because you're going to look up, you're generally going to want to bring your head with you versus your eyes, right? Downward and left and right movements are actually, I would say, easier and it's easier to focus on something lower. Right, yeah, because you're not going to do exactly what Corey just did, right? You're not going to nose up
Yeah.
and look down. Nobody does that.
I think the other thing that's useful about the monitor height being the top third like that is that when something is too high, we are all, like Dan just mentioned, and we keep talking about, we're all going to start here because we're terrible at posture, and then when the monitor's higher, you go here. So now from the side, that looks like this, which is horrible. Versus if the monitor's lower than you, sure, you could look like this and you can kind of lean into it like that. But the idea would be that your shoulders are back and your chin is tucked. So once your chin is tucked, now you're kind of already looking in that slightly downward position. So that's really where that top 1/3 issue came from. It was because our posture is supposed to be shoulders back, chin tucked. And once you do that, it's not comfortable to look upward because your chin is tucked down. So just another mention of that.
And so the position that Corey was just putting himself in terms of his head poking forward, looking up. So that's going to, Dan had spoken about upper cross syndrome. That's basically creating it, right? Your shoulder, you're not pulling your shoulders forward in that position, but holding a controller or using a mouse and keyboard does. And then by doing this, you can see like my neck just disappears. You only see my shirt line, right?
Yeah.
As I come back up, I have a neck again. Right. So that's when you're going to start to create these upper cross syndrome, the headaches, migraine,
muscle imbalances.
Yeah, muscle imbalances. And I think one thing we left out in terms of just changing pressures on the body, in terms of the head, it's easier to relate because the numbers are smaller, right? It's very difficult to kind of get an average of how much your torso weighs because everybody's
different.
Gonna
be different.
But the head weight is pretty even, I would say, around the board, depending on the person. But on average, a head is about 10 to 12 pounds, right? Everybody's seeing Jerry Maguire.
It's an easier average to measure.
Yeah.
Versus upper bodies, there's 3 different people here with significantly different body types.
Absolutely.
So that's an example.
And also take into account food. I just ate. Maybe Corey and Dan haven't eaten yet, so that's going to play a part. But anyway, when your head drifts forward, right? So every inch that it moves, the weight that it holds, the muscles hold up, doubles. Right? So 10-pound head, 1 inch forward is now 20 pounds. And just keep magnifying that as you move forward. And
math.
in the old office that I worked at, we used a posture screening tool, an iPad to kind of help map out and show people these deviations. I don't use it anymore because truthfully, I don't feel like paying for it. So I just do it myself, using my eyes and brain. But I've had patients that have had 3, 4, 5, 6 inches forward. Their head, they're holding up 100 pounds.
Seriously,
and
6? I've never seen it that bad.
It's bad. It was bad. It was bad. And I looked at them. I was like, "Is this normal for you?" They're like, "I don't even know what you're talking about." I was like, "Oh my goodness." So essentially, what I do for patients is to show them, a poor posture is I will set them up to where, optimally sitting, right?
Yeah.
I get them off position. I say, "All right, hold that." I walk around in front of them. Okay, so how does that feel? I was like, okay, I feel my muscles activating. I say, okay, relax. And everybody does this.
They fall.
And I go, and I look at them, and they go, and their eyes open up. I go, "You get it now?" They're like, "Yes." And so essentially, by me showing them that change in their posture, they are automatically rewiring how their muscles are going to activate without me doing anything further because they're going to be aware of where they, belong. And so I think that's really important in terms of showing patients, right? None of you are our patients, but being able to express to you and show you what these changes look like are very important so that you understand for yourself. And one thing that I do for, my patients, and I will happily do it for any of you that are interested, just message us in the Discord or in the comment section on the Twitch video here.
Yes, comment section.
Is take a picture of yourself from the side, wherever you're gaming, working, and we will be happy to show you how to make these changes because truthfully, it'll take no more than 5 minutes to fix, or make it more optimal for you. And like I said, feel free. I have no problem sitting down and talking with you about it. It's like we said in the beginning, it's what I harp on the most, so I have no problem
JP
to do so.